Before the colonizers, Europe as a land of the colonized. Before we dive in, I need you to do one thing. Help us grow this community of truth seekers. Hit that like button, twin. Subscribe to the New World Playbook. Share this video with someone who loves history, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement is what keeps us digging deeper into the stories they don't teach in school. Now, let's turn the map upside down. History isn't always what it seems. The kings, the castles, the flags flying high, they tell only half the story. Before Europe built empires, before it sailed to every corner of the globe, it was the one being conquered. This is the forgotten side of history, a story of invasions, migrations, and transformations that shaped the very heart of a continent. Today, we uncover Europe, not as the colonizer, but as the colonized. They say history is written by the victors, and when it comes to Europe, we often think we already know the story. Powerful kings, mighty armies, explorers sailing to distant shores to claim new lands. But what if I told you that before Europe ruled the world, it was a land conquered, settled, and reshaped by outsiders again and again? What if the very foundations of European civilization were built by people who didn't start there? Today, we turn the map upside down and discover the forgotten history of Europe as the colonized. When we think of Europe's place in history, we picture tall-masted ships sailing from Lisbon, Seville, and Amsterdam, carrying explorers and soldiers to far-off lands. The continent is framed as the source of empires, the architect of colonial systems, the force that reshaped the globe. Yet long before Europe became the colonizer, it was itself a land repeatedly colonized, settled, and transformed by others. Its soil remembers the footsteps of peoples from distant lands. Its rivers have carried the languages, beliefs, and tools of newcomers. And its landscapes have been shaped by waves of migration and conquest. To understand Europe's later dominance, we must first understand the times when it stood on the other side of the story, when it was the destination rather than the departure point. Our story begins not with the marble columns of Athens or the battlements of medieval castles, but in a colder, wilder Europe tens of thousands of years ago. Here lived the Neanderthals, humans of a different kind, adapted to the rigors of Ice Age life. They hunted in the forests, crafted stone tools, and tended their hearth fires. But around 45,000 years ago, a new people arrived. Homo sapiens, our own species, moving in from the Near East. This was the first great colonization of Europe by outsiders. They brought new technologies, new forms of art, and perhaps new ways of thinking. The meeting of the two human species was complex. There was interbreeding, conflict, and competition for resources. Within a few thousand years, the Neanderthals were gone, but their DNA still lives on in modern Europeans, a genetic memory of the continent's earliest colonized people. For millennia, Europe's population remained largely made up of hunter-gatherers. But another wave of outsiders arrived around 7,000 years ago, bringing a profound transformation: farming. These were people from Anatolia in the Near East who carried with them the seeds of wheat and barley, the knowledge of herding cattle, sheep, and goats, and the skills of building permanent villages. They cleared forests, plowed fields, and gradually replaced or absorbed the local foragers. This Neolithic colonization was not swift conquest, but a slow cultural takeover, as agriculture proved more reliable than hunting. It was the dawn of settled life in Europe, and it was brought here by migrants from elsewhere. The next great shift came from the east again, around 3000 to 2000 BCE, when people from the Pontic-Caspian steppe began moving into Europe. Often linked to the Yamnaya culture, they were skilled horse riders and pastoralists. They brought with them new burial customs, distinctive pottery, and perhaps most importantly, the early Indo-European languages that would eventually evolve into Latin, Greek, Celtic, Germanic, and many others. This wave of migration was faster and more disruptive than the farmers before them, leaving lasting marks on Europe's genetic and cultural landscape. It was yet another colonization that they done break this time by mobile herders whose influence stretched from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. Centuries later, as Europe developed its own early civilizations, colonization came not just from the east, but also from the south across the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians, master sailors from the Levant, established trading posts and colonies along the coasts of Spain, France, and Italy, bringing exotic goods and ideas from the wider world. The Greeks followed, founding cities like Massilia, modern Marseille, and spreading their architecture, politics, and religion across southern Europe. Then came Rome, itself once a colony of outsiders in a sense, which grew into the greatest colonizing force the continent had yet seen. Roman power swept through Gaul, Britain, the Balkans, and beyond, imposing roads, laws, language, and an imperial system that would define Europe for centuries. While we remember Rome as a European empire, it is important to recall that its origins lay on the Italian peninsula, once part of a world where the Mediterranean was dominated by older powers from the Near East and North Africa. Rome eventually fell, but the colonization of Europe did not stop. From the north came the Vikings, who raided, traded, and settled along the coasts and rivers of Britain, Ireland, France, and even deep into Russia. From the east, steppe nomads such as the Magyars rode in, settling in the Carpathian Basin and founding the basis of modern Hungary. From the south and southeast came perhaps the most significant wave of all in the medieval period, the expansion of the Islamic world into Europe. The Umayyad Caliphate crossed from North Africa into Spain in the 8th century, establishing Al-Andalus, a center of learning and culture for centuries. In the east, the Ottoman Turks would, in time, push deep into the Balkans, taking Constantinople in 1453 and ruling over much of southeastern Europe for hundreds of years. These episodes were not brief interruptions, but long-lasting periods of political control and cultural influence. The Ottomans ruled in Europe for longer than the United States has existed. Arabic place names still dot the Iberian Peninsula. Hungarian identity still bears the imprint of its steppe origins. And much of southeastern Europe retains traces of Ottoman administration, architecture, and cuisine. Even in the modern era, Europe was not immune to colonization by foreign powers. Napoleon's French Empire redrew the map of the continent, imposing French laws, currency, and administration far beyond France's borders. In the 20th century, the continent endured some of the most intense occupations in its history. Nazi Germany sought to reshape Europe according to its ideology, and the Soviet Union extended its control over Eastern Europe after World War II, installing governments loyal to Moscow and integrating economies into its sphere of influence. These were forms of colonization in all but name, control by an external power, backed by military force and cultural pressure. Throughout this long history, Europe's role was not fixed. It shifted from being the colonized to the colonizer, and often both at the same time in different regions. The same continent that sent crusaders to the Holy Land was itself home to Muslim-ruled Spain. The same England that built colonies in North America had once been conquered by Romans, Vikings, and Normans. The experience of being colonized shaped how Europeans would later approach colonization themselves. It gave them models of rule, technologies of control, and even justifications for conquest, many drawn from their own past experiences under foreign domination. This perspective also reminds us that colonization is not simply about armies and treaties. It is about the movement of people, the mixing of cultures, the transmission of ideas and technologies, and the reshaping of landscapes. Europe's languages, foods, faiths, and customs are all products of these layered histories. The bread we break, the stories we tell, the words we speak, they are all touched by people who once came from somewhere else. To see Europe only as a colonizer is to miss half the story. For tens of thousands of years, it was a land open to newcomers, sometimes by invitation, often by force. Its borders shifted, its rulers changed, and its peoples adapted again and again. By the time the ships of Columbus and da Gama set out to cross the oceans, Europe was already a mosaic built from centuries of outside influence. Its eventual power rested on foundations laid by those who had come before: migrants, traders, warriors, and empires who made Europe their home, and in doing so made it what it is. Before the colonizers, there was the colonized. And in that story lies the true complex history of Europe, a history not of isolation, but of connection, transformation, and continual rebirth under the influence of others. If this journey into the hidden side of Europe's past opened your eyes, Imagine what else is waiting to be uncovered. Here on the New World Playbook, we tell the stories they don't teach in school, the ones that challenge the official version of history. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you the untold chapters of our shared past. This is the New World Playbook, where history gets real.